so drunk then that you try to get up on stage and dance with the strippers, the kind of drunk that has stopped the Uber because you're going to vomit drunk. Look, I understand there are people who have alcohol problems, but we cannot trust the safety of our country to someone who has demonstrated repeatedly using very bad judgment with alcohol and doing it in ways that truly have incapacitated him.
Senator Elizabeth Warren at her most memorable last night here on the show, speaking on the subject of Pete Hegseth. Mr. Hegseth is the co-host of a weekend morning show on Fox News, and now the nominee to be Defense Secretary in the Trump administration. Despite concerns like the ones expressed by Senator Warren and other Democrats on the Armed Services Committee, Pete Hegseth's nomination advanced today in the Senate largely along party lines. There were two Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who joined all Democrats in voting no against him today. That means if one more Republican joins the two of them in the final vote tomorrow, the vote on him will be tied, but he'd still get through because J.D. Vance, as vice president, would break the tie in Pete Hegseth's favor. If two more Republican senators said no, though, Mr. Hegseth's nomination would fail. Even as the Hegseth nomination has continued to move forward, so has the reporting that has Democrats and a few Republicans questioning whether he is an okay pick to oversee the entire U.S. military. Mr. Hegseth has been dogged by a long list of allegations, each of which he has denied. He denies allegations of excessive drinking, including by work colleagues who said he was frequently drunk, sometimes very drunk, at work functions, and that he had alcohol on his breath, even at his morning show job. He denies alleged mismanagement of two nonprofits for veterans. He denies an allegation of sexual assault in a 2017 case where prosecutors didn't press charges, but where Mr. Hegseth did reach an agreement with the woman who had gone to police. The agreement included a payment to her that she should be quiet about it. Today, we learned how much he paid. Answering a written question from Senator Warren, Pete Hegseth said that he paid this woman $50,000 for her silence. But new questions this week about Hegseth began with a story first reported by NBC News. Here's the headline, quote, senators receive affidavit containing new allegations against Pete Hegseth, who denies the claims. The sworn affidavit comes from his former sister-in-law, woman who was married to his brother. She submitted the affidavit at the request of the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. NBC News reporting, quote, Danielle Hegseth described in the affidavit allegations of volatile and threatening conduct by Hegseth that made his second wife, Samantha, fear for her safety. In the affidavit, the former sister-in-law details instances in which she says she was, quote, a witness to and even a victim of emotional abuse by Pete Hegseth. She says she personally witnessed him abusing alcohol numerous times. That reporting is what Warren was responding to so memorably last night. An attorney for Hegseth denied the story, telling NBC News that Hegseth's ex-wife, quote, has never alleged that there was any abuse. She signed court documents acknowledging there was no abuse. She recently reaffirmed the same during her FBI interview. The ex-wife herself told NBC there was no physical abuse in my marriage. And, quote, I have not and will not comment on my marriage to Pete Hegseth. For the record, NBC reports that she gave the FBI a prepared statement that said Hegseth has had and continues to have a problem with alcohol abuse. But the question of whether Hegseth's two ex-wives were able to publicly discuss details of their marriages to Pete Hegseth, that came up during his Senate hearing.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Turns out that while this is not a full non-disclosure agreement, there is something in the divorce papers from Pete Hegseth's second marriage that is worth knowing about, given how his confirmation hearings have gone. Check this out. This is the divorce decree from 2018 in the Minnesota court system. MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin was able to obtain this today. You can see the decree contains a, quote, parenting plan setting out how the Hegseths would handle taking care of the kids after the divorce. Part of that plan includes, quote, avoiding derogatory comments. Quote, both parties agree to not say anything negative about the other parent to or in front of the children, or allow third parties within their control to do so. In addition, both parties will refrain from engaging themselves in any public discourse, including through either traditional media or social media, disparaging the other party, and will take reasonable steps to encourage friends and family to refrain from doing so. And they both signed this document, Pete Hegseth and his second ex-wife, Samantha. Again, to be clear, this clause is not a full non-disclosure agreement. A lawyer for Mr. Hegseth, Tim Parlatore, tells MSNBC, quote, it is a limited non-disparagement agreement. These are two legally distinct concepts. There's nothing inappropriate or inaccurate about Mr. Hegseth's answers to the committee. It takes some significant imagination and intellectual dishonesty for anyone to consider this to bear on the credibility of his testimony. Both parties will refrain from engaging in any public discourse disparaging the other party. Senator Kaine provided a statement to MSNBC as well, saying, quote, that clause in a divorce settlement could expose someone to severe consequences for sharing unflattering information about an ex-partner, even if that information is true. The existence of this agreement, which has not been previously reported, seems important on the eve of Pete Hegseth's confirmation vote tomorrow in the United States Senate, one that seems to hinge on just one or two votes. Joining us now is Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent. Lisa, it's good to see you. Thanks for your reporting on this. Can you describe the document that you found? Tell us how it fits into the broader picture of reporting on Hegseth.
Well, I think, Rachel, let's talk about, first, I want to clarify something. Yeah. This is not a full non-disparagement provision. In fact, it's a very broad non-disparagement provision. What it's not is a non-disclosure agreement in typical fashion. In terms of how this fits into the larger reporting about Hegseth, Hegseth has been dogged by all sorts of allegations about his past, which you recounted in your earlier segment, including ones related to his two marriages. The fact that Hegseth had denied that he had non-disclosure agreements might be technically correct, but we talk a lot about the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law.
Non-disclosure versus non-disparagement is the distinction.
That's correct. But functionally, even though this doesn't say either one of them can't say anything, functionally, this operates almost as if it were a non-disclosure agreement, because by agreeing not to engage in any, and this is the quote, public discourse that would disparage the other spouse, essentially, Samantha Hegseth has her hands tied. She is precluded legally from saying something that could be construed by Pete Hegseth and his legal representatives to be damaging to him. And as we know, Pete Hegseth and his lawyers have alleged multiple times to multiple people that the things they have said in the public are themselves defamatory, if not violations of other agreements that he has entered into with them.
And this matters in the confirmation process because of claims about his relationship with his ex-wives, particularly his second wife, that are things that raise questions about his character.
And I want to put this into context, particularly with respect to Samantha Hegseth's one and only public statement in regards to that affidavit submitted by her former sister-in-law. That's an affidavit in which Samantha Hegseth's former sister-in-law says that based on things that Samantha said to her, as well as things that she observed, she believes not only that Pete Hegseth has an alcohol abuse problem, but that he was abusive to Samantha. Samantha Hegseth's statement to NBC says there was no physical abuse during my marriage, but she doesn't deny any emotional abuse. She doesn't deny that she feared for her safety, which is another allegation that Danielle Hegseth makes in the affidavit. She doesn't deny even that she had a code word that she used with friends and family in case she ever needed an escape plan with respect to that fear of Pete Hegseth. All she is saying in her public statement is that there was no physical abuse. There is not a lot of contradiction between that statement and what Danielle Hegseth is saying. Danielle Hegseth has an allegation of one instance of sexual abuse, and she herself draws the distinction between physical and sexual abuse in her affidavit.
Briefly, have you heard anything from Capitol Hill tonight?
I have. I've heard from Senator Tim Kaine's office because Senator Kaine was asked what this means to him. He said not only can he understand this language as sort of a disincentive for someone to speak, but a spokesperson for the senator commented to me tonight when I asked them, do you think Hegseth was untruthful or misleading in his answers to the questions Senator Kaine asked him during his testimony? The response on the record attributable to a spokesperson for Senator Tim Kaine is yes, he does think that, Rachel.
That's important, given that his vote is slated for tomorrow. Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent, thank you for this reporting. Thanks for helping us get it on the air. I know it was a bear to get it sorted tonight, but we've got every I dotted, every T crossed, and I really appreciate your work on this.
Thank you for
having me. I'll be right back. Stay with us.